I'm Marilyn Priel with The Better Part. When a revolution occurs, oftentimes a civil war is not far behind. We're going to be talking about the American Civil War. Stay tuned.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
My guest is a former high school American history instructor for over 30 years and is currently a guest lecturer in many different places. He's very popular and great demand. And I'm happy to introduce Reno Di Bono. Hi, Reno. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Now, what lasting imprint did the Civil War have and leave on our nation to this day?
Well, before the Civil War, America was regarded as United States. After the Civil War, when the South was soundly crushed, very much, it was regarded as the United States, and there's no doubt about federal authority. Also, the newly freed man, slaves, has presented and still present a problem to this country. I recently saw the statue of James Meredith on the campus of University of Mississippi with a noose around its neck and a Confederate flag covering it. And it's under investigation. It happened just last week. So in some places, the Confederate flag is still hoisted, still waved. Well, what does the Confederate flag really stand for? If I lived in 1860, I would have absolutely joined the Union Army. Because the Confederate flag to me, and if I was saying this in South Carolina, they'd probably shut the TV down. The Confederate flag to me represents oppression of a minority. And that's something that's totally unacceptable to me and to the United States of America. And that's one of the major imprints of the Civil War. Also, the third thing is that the Civil War was total war. The term unconditional surrender was coined by General Grant, and that was used by Franklin D. Roosevelt in World War II. So it left a very much of a lasting imprint, plus other things. That's what I have to say about that.
Okay, very well said. Now, how did give us some causes. I know there were several for the North, had several causes that led to the Civil War, the
Right.
federalism and some abolitionist, and then the South was states' rights and economy. They needed the slaves to run the farms.
Well, there's many theories. Depends on the school of history you read, the revisionists. The South, by 1860, had become a separate civilization from the North. The North was actually heading into the 20th century. The South was heading into the 18th century. Feudalism. So how could two separate civilizations exist side by side, have different interests? And the one major cause is slavery. That slavery retards social development, economic growth. It causes you to have a police state. You have to control them. You know, the slave is a slave. In the North, slavery was abolished without really any major problem. The North attracted immigrants from all over the world. The population was 22 million versus 6 or 7 million in the South. So you have two separate civilizations living side by side. And that, to me, is one of the major reasons why they couldn't get along.
The immigrants who were coming over during that time were actually working in the factories. There was employment for them,
Yes,
I
there's a lot of
suppose.
employment.
And but they were being paid.
They were being paid. It's called free labor. The South chose slave labor. If the South had chose free labor, they would have been much better off. Because in the South, with slave labor, there's no reason to go to school. Why have a public school? So the whole society retards. In the North, it's needed. You need a public school because an employee has to know how to do things. When you work in a steel mill, an iron factory, on the railroad, etc. The immigrants were poor. They came from Ireland, Germany, and Great Britain, for the most part. And what caused the war, again, let me explain the several causes because it's pretty complicated. One, the Civil War was caused by slavery, that the North wished to free and liberate the slaves. Totally untrue. That's not what caused it.
It was federalism.
Yeah, that's the idea of a national government intervening in your state affair to affect your domestic institution, which was slavery. We're not going to go there to affect your marriages. We're not going there to do anything about your education. We're going there to free your slaves. That's not true. Totally wrong. That's one of the first theories. The second theory is that the South was married to the notion of states' rights. The state has the right. The federal government is a creation of the states. It is more important than the federal government. And if the federal government becomes abusive, we will leave. We'll divorce you. That's the second cause. So the South regarded the Civil War as a war between the states. The North regarded it as a crisis over federalism where these Southerners refused to obey the law. What law? Well, Lincoln was elected president legally. He was legally, the votes were cast. No one cheated. He won. And you are not going to obey the law? He's our president. So now let me just explain the other theory is economic exploitation. That is that the North was a brutal giant exploiting the South, an industrial section exploiting an agricultural one. That's the third cause. The fourth cause comes out of World War II. It's the cause of the psychological school. The Civil War was caused by psychos.
On both sides.
On both sides. The abolitionists, they were crazy. And the South had fire eaters. You know, Quantrell's Raiders. The South had people that would kill you on the spot if you were a Northerner, like me, right sitting here right now. If this was 1860, I would be lynched, taken right out, gone.
So the people in the North, the abolitionists, who were against slavery, and Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and there was John Brown who led the rebellion and so forth. But not all the Northerners.
Absolutely not.
Because in the factories, they wanted the cotton. In the textile mills, they wanted the cotton. So it was more about federalism versus states' rights than it was.
I think it was. I think it
slavery.
Was. The bottom line, underlying everything is slavery. First of all, there's a difference between Stowe, Harriet Beecher Stowe. She did not use violence. She was an author. Her book was so well read. They made a play out of that on Broadway. In England, where people's jobs were based on the Southern cotton, they sympathized with the North after they read that book. So these were abolitionists, but they did not advocate violence. However, John Brown did. Mm-hmm. Was he a martyr or a hero? You know what he did? He was extremely violent. I think he had 27 sons.
Those were all his kids,
I think he did,
his children who were
He goes out there to Kansas. This is before Dred Scott. In 1856, when they could not resolve that issue. How do you admit Kansas to the Union? Is it going to be a slave state or a free state? They couldn't vote on it because they had warring factions from both sides. Jesse James, Quantrell, the Southern border ruffians, they were called. They would cross the border with heavily armed, and they would go into northern settlements, and they'd hang people. Then John Brown would come in with his Beecher's Bibles. That's Beecher, her brother, Henry Ward Beecher, supplied a Sharps rifle, very, very good rifle, to the abolitionists. And they would go into their southern villages and settlements, and they would kill Southerners. That was in 1856.
So it's basically terrorist.
They were terrorists.
Splinter.
There's no difference between the Taliban and Jesse James and John Brown. None. They believed that God was on their side, and if I kill you because you're a slave owner, I am right. I'll never go to hell. When John Brown was hung after Harper's Ferry, he believed he was a saint.
Would you talk about the free states versus the slave states and all the new territories that came in as a result of the
topic.
Yeah, just briefly, but
Let me give you a quick background about slavery. The first slaves were introduced as indentured servants, just like white people, except they were called Negro, which is discrimination because of their color. They were picked up in Africa by white ships like Portuguese, Spanish, British, Yankee seamen. They were brought, and they were not sold. They were indentured. But if you were black, you were discriminated against because of racism. The prejudice came first, not slavery. And then it caught on, but they thought it would not survive. When they wrote the Constitution, they had to compromise it. 3/5 clause. If you were a black man, you were 3/5 of a white for taxes and voting. And slavery was also protected by the 10th Amendment. So you see, so the Constitution is a slave owner's document. But they had to do that to get the South to join the Union. But the North leaders said, listen, it's going to die out because slavery is not profitable. American cotton is full of seeds. And it would take a slave 12 hours to pick out one ball of cotton, 1, 2, and it's just not profitable. So here comes a guy named Eli Whitney. He comes down into the plantation as a tutor, and he invents, like a mousetrap, the cotton gin. Now the slave is profitable. They didn't know that would happen. That was about 1810. Now slavery becomes really important. You know what cotton's worth? I mean, my shirt, but a beautiful fabric. The South becomes very rich, and they hope to entrench it. And they do. They make it, it's legal in the South. The North is alarmed, so Congress in 1820, when Missouri knocks on the door to become a state, Missouri says, we want to be a slave state. Congress says, okay, you're a slave state, but we're going to carve Maine out of Massachusetts and make that a free state. So they balance it. Compromise. Then they look at the territories of Jefferson, the Louisiana territories. That is our future. Remember, there is no California. Spain owns that. So they say, there shall not be slavery in those territories. There's a line, 36 degrees 30, going out from Missouri. Now, Missouri is part of that purchase, but that's a slave state. But all the rest, Kansas, Nebraska, and the Great Plains, Dakotas, free states. Everybody's happy.
Okay, then the Mexican-American War comes, and
South,
then the issue.
They're expanding slavery. And you know, when you see the huge profits from slavery, you do not restore the land. You destroy the land. The land goes from black to gray because the profits are too enormous. So you need new land. So the Southerners now say, what about Texas? So they go illegally, cross the border into Texas. Mexico has no slavery. And they begin to plant their institution of slavery, and they cause war. Remember the Alamo? In Texas. And finally, Texas becomes a republic, slaveholding republic. And eventually they think, well, we're going to win this because Texas will be 5 states. Carve it up. Then in the 1840s, there's the idea of California. They want San Francisco. The Polk administration wants a port on the West Coast. for trade with the Orient and as defense. So they manipulate a war. The Mexican War is really illegal. I mean, if you looked at things correctly, we should give everything back to Mexico. California was their territory. We took it away. Arizona, New Mexico. Abraham Lincoln was a congressman. He served two years, and he was called a traitor because he opposed the Mexican War. But Mexico will poison us, as was quoted by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And when we won and we took all that land, the South now said we have to make these slave states. Now, can California be a slave state? We raise cotton here, the best. Our cotton is silky. We have the best. We're the world's leading cotton producer. We could have had slavery here. But now you talk about abolitionists and the South. The people that came to California, called the 49ers, were mostly Southerners. And they came here to find gold, and once they did, California would then knock on the door for statehood. These Southerners did not want slavery because slavery ruins your economic opportunity. It's like a monopoly. Now the South said, my gosh, okay, we'll let you be a free state, but the other territories will have popular sovereignty. Let them vote on it. And we may get some slave states. However, the big issue with us are those runaways. We're losing property. What is a slave worth? Full-grown male slave, 20 years old, is worth $2,000 gold. That's like a BMW. I mean, imagine brand new BMWs running away.
So they run off to a free northern state.
North. And there's Harriet Tubman with the Underground Railroad. So she goes by, and the slaves know, and they figure it out, and they go, they can't, and they're, you know, the South is an open territory. They go north, and I look at the Canadian hockey team, and I see black players. That's who they are. They took them, those went all the way to Canada, and they're free. But any runaway in that Compromise of 1850 was supposed to be returned to their owner. The federal marshals would go into Boston and take a runaway slave in chains and arrest those that aided him. It's against fugitive slave law. That law was one of the chief causes of the Civil War because the North was appalled by that. Said, this man's been here for 5 years. This man has never been a slave, and you're taking him back. What are you doing? So there's more alienation because of this fugitive slave law. However, California was a free state, and the North now had to balance.
So when did they secede? And that had
Congress legislates a civil war in 1856. Might also add that the party of the South and the North was the Democratic Party. The slave-owning party was the Democratic Party. They're the ones that advanced slavery. Congress legislated a civil war in 1856, the Kansas and Nebraska Act. Oh, what a mistake. The South wanted to bring their slaves everywhere in the United States. Why not? When I take my car, I can go to New York with my car. If I have a horse, I could take my horse into Nevada. Why can't I take my slave? Doesn't that make sense? Isn't a slave property? Now, after the KansasNebraska Act and that, the only thing left is a war. It was that bad. So what happens in Kansas is a miniature civil war. You have the South wants Kansas to be a slave state. Well, it's a wheat-growing state. Wheat is not for slavery. You understand when you plant wheat, your labor doesn't work all winter long. So what do you do with 200 slaves and they're not doing anything? You're talking about rebellion. It's dangerous. But they wanted Kansas to be a slave state. Nebraska would be a free state. The abolitionists said, no way. We're going to live behind the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This is protected against slavery. The future of the country is relies on it. We don't want slavery in America. Enter Abraham Lincoln, our greatest president. Unbelievable. He's there at the right time. Follows Pierce and Buchanan, but it's pronounced Buchanan, who are really, really bad. They don't know what to do. And they're Northerners. They're Democrat. The Republican Party is founded on the KansasNebraska Act. The Republican Party is a sectional party. It goes east and west only. There are no Republicans in the South. Does the Republican Party want to free the slaves? No. Only the abolitionists do, and they don't like the abolitionists. The Republican Party is made up of Western farmers called free soil. No slavery. We want to be farmers. Mom and pop, 4 kids, windmill, our farm. We don't want plantations in Kansas or Nebraska or California. We want a free country. So they support the Missouri Compromise, but not abolition. No. I mean, if Lincoln said, elect me, I'm going to free the slaves, he would have never got elected. I want to mention now William Seward in the 1850s. He was the front runner. He should have been president. But you know what he said? He said, there's a higher law. Slavery is immoral, period. And there is going to be an irrepressible conflict, he said. He scared every Southerner to death. And the Republican Party could not nominate him because he spoke too much. Lincoln didn't say anything.
He was pragmatic, wasn't he? I
mean,
Lincoln he played
really shrewd.
He bent to both sides to some extent.
Well, you know what he said? Lincoln, remember, he served a 1 term as a congressman, and then he was finished. He was defeated. He goes back to Illinois. He marries right, very ambitious, marries Todd's, and he becomes a famous lawyer in Illinois. Now he sees the handwriting on the wall, and he says, I'm just saying that, I can't come out and say, let's free the slave, even though he doesn't like slavery, we know that. Politically safe to say, I stand by the Missouri Compromise. No extension. We're not going to bother slavery in Alabama. That's not what I want. I'm not going to intervene, but I'm not going to let you expand it. We have a law passed legally by Congress, the Missouri Compromise, 1820. Your Southerners voted for it. That law will stand. Now the Dred Scott case says the law is illegal. Comes the Lincoln-Douglas debates. They're fabulous. Judge Douglas is the 5'1" little giant from Illinois, a Democrat. His buddy and rival is the 6'5" Abraham Lincoln from Illinois. They're both from the same state. And they're going to meet in a series of 7 or 8 debates up and down the state of Illinois for the seat in the U.S. Senate. And Lincoln is a dark horse. He will lose this election. But the Lincoln-Douglas debates are publicized nationally and internationally. That's not what it's about. It's about the Union. The Union shall be preserved. That's the important point.
So this is what Lincoln was after, preserving the Union.
Well, Lincoln could not say, I'm going to abolish slavery. It was illegal. Slavery is protected by the Constitution. You can't just, can the president change the Constitution? No. It has to be an amendment. And there was the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th. That's the only way you could do it.
So then at what point did he do the Emancipation Proclamation?
Oh, that was after 1862.
Okay.
He could not free the slaves unless he had a major victory. And Antietam was that, Maryland. And he signed that document and put it in the drawer. And it did not free the slaves.
And why
only
not?
In the South. It only freed the slaves behind enemy lines. You see how political he was? And Fort Sumter was a fortress inside Charleston Bay. The Confederates had guns all around it, and they could blow it up. Let them fire the first shot. Why? He politically knew he had to unite the North. And so the South, which was emotionally just fired up, Lincoln sent in a supply ship of medical supplies. Peaceful, white flag, you know. And guess what the South did? They shelled the fort with the American flag there. Now, you know what that did to the North? Oh, Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers. He got 200,000. They were turning them away. And they were going to go down there and really fight now. The United States is one of the most sacred countries in the world. You can't fire on the flag. You can't do that. You know what it stands for? Read the Gettysburg Address. But this battlefield is consecrated in the blood of men who fought to preserve an idea that's never seen reality in the world, that all men are created equal.
Well, okay, final question. What is the legacy of the Civil War?
Well, it was 750,000 dead or wounded. And you got to look at the Southerners, their bravery, fighting for their cause, which to me is morally wrong. The Confederate Army was made up of young men that did not own slaves. They just believed in their system. The South has never disavowed what they did. They are still fighting the Civil War today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Italian-American boy, that your family came
I get
from
excited
Italy.
about this topic.
Yeah, so America means a lot to you. Thanks for coming and
Thanks for having me,
giving us a
Marilyn.
lot of good
Thank you.
information
Thank you.
today. Thank you for joining us for this program. As always, we love having you. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you enjoyed it. And we hope you come back next time. Goodbye for now.